Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way.
Welcome to the Next Reel Speakeasy on rashpixel.fm. I'm Andy Nelson, and that over there is Pete Wright.
Hi, everybody.
On the Next Reel Speakeasy, we invite a guest from the industry to join us, and instead of serving up their favorite cocktails, they serve up movies that they love so that we can all talk about them. We'd like to welcome our guest to this month's show, Aussie cinematographer Toby Oliver. A graduate of Melbourne's renowned Swinburne Film School, Toby kept busy making beautiful images for films that played all over the world, and garnered him a number of ACS awards, as well as Australian Academy Award nominations. Now living in LA, and hot off a great year, having shot both Jordan Peele's fantastic horror, Get Out, and Chris Landon's comic thriller, Happy Death Day, Toby's latest film, Insidious: The Last Key, just hit theaters this past Friday, as of when we're recording this. Welcome to the show, Toby.
Thanks very much. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
So you're a cinematographer from Down Under. How did you get into cinematography? What was your path that led you to that?
Well, look, I started pretty early on because I went to straight out of high school. I got into Swinburne Film School, which you mentioned in the intro. And at Swinburne, in those days, it was really a writer-director course. But each student who went through that school pretty small film school, got to do a bit of everything. We did editing, we edited our own films, we did cinematography in other students' films. We are very, green and embryonic in our skills. However, that's where we started off. And so when I finished there, graduated from there, I had directed some shorts, but I really found myself gravitating, towards the camera in a pretty sort of direct way. And so that was what I decided to pursue. And, I just kept shooting after that. I shot a lot of short films, and before I was able to, graduate and shoot longer form feature films after a few years after I left film school. But that's how I started. I really started a film school and then just went into cinematography from there.
How do you frame that? Thinking about what it is that drives you to camera.
Well, I've always been pretty visual. I think, I got my first stills camera as a, young teenager, 12 or 13 years old, and used to do a lot of photography. And I found an affinity with that. I mean, I have an eye for that. Mm-hmm. And that's something that people kind of, they kind of have or they don't have. That's a sort of artistic sensibility for the composition of a shot and sort of the feeling for the light. And so I guess I've always had that. That was the area that in filmmaking, that's where I found my strength was, it was in terms of writing scripts and so on. And it wasn't, my scripts were a little bit hokey and corny. I mean, I made the movies and they're still there. People want to go and search very deep to find them, my short films. But they're kind of, as I was only young, what was I, 19 years old making those films. But I saw that, my strength wasn't really in that on the words on the page so much as it was with the pictures. And that's where, you kind of, hopefully you make a smart decision to try and do what you're good at rather than what you're not so good at.
You're right.
And that's
always a plus.
Yeah, it's always a good idea. And so I kind of just been pursuing that for a long time, and following that path.
That's fantastic. Now in cinematography, you've done a variety of different projects, including some horror films we've already talked about, and some documentary projects, and a drama, kind of a whole variety. Do you find as a cinematographer you end up gravitating toward anything in particular, or are you kind of open to all of it? I'm
kind of from the school of being open to all of it in a way, because I think a cinematographer's job is to really you're there as a fundamental sort of cog in the wheels of telling the story visually. And it's sort of, no matter what that story is or what genre that is, it's your job to fit in there and make it work, visually. And I think for me, I find it a thrill to work. It's quite exciting to work in different genres. And different types, go from a television show to a documentary, or then go to a movie, a horror movie, or then go to, a different genre of movie. And I find that refreshing. I mean, a lot of people tend to perhaps more specialize, and they're sort of just doing sort of action movies, or they only just do horrors, or they only just do this or that. I like to sort of spread and sort of do different things, because it's refreshing and refreshes your creative juices if you have to tackle something that you really haven't dealt with for a while. That said, since I've landed here in America from Australia, I've moved over here from Australia about four and a bit years ago. I've done almost exclusively horror. And that's just because that's where the path has led since I landed here.
Do you ever find there's a risk as a cinematographer to be typecast?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think less so in Australia, where you kind of have to be a bit more of a jack of all trades, so to speak, because of the nature of the business. It's a small industry there. But I think here in the United States, it's a big industry. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of different projects being made. You can get very much so typecast as the guy who did that, or, whatever your last job is that's what you do, as opposed to looking back and seeing all the stuff you've done over your whole career. So for me, it's been, it's been great, my opportunity to start working here and do a whole bunch of movies, especially with Blumhouse, with, Happy Death Day and Get Out as just a couple of them. But I'm also cognizant of the fact to be able to not get too narrowly, pigeonholed at the same time. So, I'm trying to avoid that long term.
I'm looking as I just scroll your credits. We've got from at least 2016, The Darkness and Wildling, and then Get Out, of course, and Happy Death. I mean, and Insidious, The Last Key. I think all of them, their tags could very well start with uncovering a dark secret.
Right.
They all kind of fit into that. It's really funny.
Yeah, that's true.
Andy is the absolute connoisseur of the horror genre. I am way too emotionally invested in the film. They scare the hell out of me, man. They scare the hell out of me. Although Get Out, one of my very favorite films of the year. That was just an exceptionally strong film and beautiful to watch and super clever and Happy Death Day. What is Happy Death Day doing being funny? It's fantastic.
Well, what's interesting about those two films in particular, and Get Out especially, is that whilst it's called a horror movie, it's been slotted into that genre, except at the Golden Globes, where it's a musical / comedy. But it's
gotta love the Golden Globes.
Anyway, who knows? We'll find out tomorrow if that that little idea sort of is going to work out. But it was it's not just a horror movie. I mean, it transcends genre, and it's about a whole raft of other things other than just being a horror story, a ghost story. And that's what I find exciting. And I think within the horror genre, there's opportunity for that. It's not like some of the movies in the genre obviously are, conform and, fit your expectations much more. But then there's movies like Get Out, which is almost, it's kind of unique, but there are others where it's transcending the genre, and it's exciting because you're messing around with different ideas and different ways of telling the story, and I find that exciting.
Absolutely,
within a genre of films, and Happy Death Day too. I think has also its sort of it's a sort of a comedy slasher in a way, but then it's also dealing with the whole time loop metaphysical weirdness of the girl waking up over and over and over, sort of a la Groundhog Day. So it's sort of that's also a meshing of two or three genres in there.
Speaking of movies that might shift a little bit from expectations as far as what you get from them normally, we're actually here to talk about a fairly recent film that you picked. Last year's, I should have checked, but I'm assuming we're not talking about the 1958 film directed by Leslie Norman.
Oh, that would be a shame.
We are in fact talking about Christopher Nolan's film.
I haven't seen the 1958 version. No, I'm definitely talking about Chris Nolan's movie.
So what is it about this film that made you interested in wanting to have a conversation about it?
Well, for me, it was interesting because there's a raft of technical things, and Chris Nolan is this. This is pertaining to cinematography in particular. Chris Nolan is a absolute diehard film addict. He never touches anything but motion picture film, and the word digital to him is like a very rude word that he doesn't like to use or even deal with. And so that's kind of interesting in this sort of tackling this kind of epic. And the reason why it was interesting that he chose to use film, and not just ordinary film. He shot 70% of the movie on IMAX, which is the largest film format that there ever was, or is. It's a massive negative 70 millimeter film, 65 millimeter film traveling sideways through the camera. So it's a monster format, but it's analog and it's old fashioned. And he's making this epic movie, but which is at the same time has been an epic war story about the escape of the British Army from the Second World War from Europe. It's told in a very intimate way, where the camera is just so close and so visceral with the action that it's just interesting that he's using this giant kind of very much old-fashioned and outdated technology to shoot an incredibly intimate sort of epic movie. And that's what interested me from the cinematography side of it.
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, obviously it's a big war film. I mean, there's big war sequences and everything as the planes are coming down and sinking ships, and I mean, there's a lot of things happening. But I do agree there are elements within the film that made me wonder, like, why did he choose to use this format? Just like I asked when Quentin Tarantino shot The Hateful Eight.
And it's a similar question. He shot that on 65 millimeter. And the whole thing takes place in one room, with a group of, it starts off with 8 people, but it's all literally in one room, except for the first 10 minutes of the movie or whatever.
Right.
And so making a movie like Dunkirk, where there's all this action and really visceral, and your camera's in all sorts of places and underwater and hanging off the sides of ships and in plane Spitfire cockpits that are actually flying in the air and doing actual dogfights with these cameras attached, filming the pilots and whatnot. Why do it the hard way? Why didn't he just get the latest digital Sonys or whatever cameras, the best of the best, because budget's not really a problem with a Chris Nolan movie, and do it the easy way. And it's I find that really quite fascinating.
For me, it struck me, and first of all, cinematography by Hoyt van Hoytema, who is a madman, watching the team of people try to lift that camera onto his shoulder for these shots. Unreal what he did. So massive credit to him.
Oh no, and he took it on, and he's he just is it. Extraordinary. Yeah,
he feels no pain is what we're talking about, really.
I read articles where people are sort of asking him, how do you hold that thing for so long? And it's like, I just, try not, I don't think about it. He just does it.
Right. Right.
Oh,
some people are missing a nerve connection in their spinal cord, and they literally don't feel pain. And that's what he sounds like. A little physical pain. It's okay. Yeah. You get over it.
Yeah, because the whole movie is almost virtually the whole. So big stretches of the movie are handheld with an IMAX camera,
and some of it handheld on a boat too.
Yeah, most of the boat stuff is handheld, because I've shot on boats before. The easiest way to shoot on a boat is handheld, because you use your body to counteract all the movement of the motion of the water. You can't really do it on a tripod. Forget about it. It just doesn't work.
This was the thing that struck me about the using the big frame. We've seen it when we go to see Dark Knight, for example, and you see when the frame adjusts and into IMAX, and you understand then that we've switched to IMAX to capture a certain sense of scope. And I find it so jarring in this film that we never change from the big, the wide shots, the super scope shots, to the shots close up on the faces, trying to reload a jammed weapon. And it's always jarring to me that because I never expect my feeling, my emotional connection to the frame to change when I see those faces. And in this film, I absolutely do. It really does make a difference. And I really, as a digital shooter myself, I hate Nolan for this, because I want him not to be right, but it is incredible. There's
something about it, isn't it? And it's I just watched the film, again, obviously recently for this, and those, it's for a lot of people don't really even realize or understand the difference in the format and why it's different, but it exists sort of like on an emotional level as well. And I guess it's that large format thing and those huge lenses. Then when you get up close to people's faces, it creates a sense of depth and sort of realism or roundness or whatever you want to call it. So it's one of those things a little bit hard to put your finger on, but it's certainly it gives an incredible to me, it's an incredible effect of intimacy, of standing there right next to that person on screen in a funny way.
When you think about how they it's not just about the emotional sort of resonance that comes with the large format. It's also a certain intention around Nolan and Hoytema in the way they structure their shots. Can you talk a little bit about what strikes you?
Yeah. It's interesting how it's kind of in the editing and the sound too, because the way Nolan puts the whole film together, it's like the whole movie is sort of this slow burn with these peaks of action and then sort of goes quiet for a moment, and then peaks of action, and that slowly keeps building towards the end. All the different three storylines, which are all happening in different sort of time spaces, kind of meld together, and it's all sort of happening at once. But it's in a way, a lot of the shots in it are quite simple and straightforward. It might be just a handheld shot, but there's something about the proximity of the camera to what's happening that makes the difference. Other than the big epic wide shots, the camera is often really very close to to the people and the action, but it feels expansive at the same time. And so it's classic in a way. It's quite classic filmmaking. I found the movie, upon the time I first saw it, almost yes, it's a war movie and it's full of quite a lot of action, and it's there's brutality in it and there's emotion, but it's quite meditative in a way because there's so little dialogue. I mean, it's like a page of dialogue probably in the whole thing, and you kind of get sort of sucked into, lulled into it in a way, and go along for the ride. And I think that's really quite interesting filmmaking because it's not often the way an action war movie will be told, this kind of tone.
Well, that's something that was really interesting that struck me is how I did kind of gravitate to following these people. That, I mean, it's a tricky film because it's not like one where, like you were saying, you don't really have a protagonist. There's not a central character that you're following through this whole thing. There are characters that we are following, like Tommy on the beach, and Ferrier the pilot, and Mr. Dawson on the boat. But it's not really their stories. They're just people in this big, situation. It's very much a situational film where we're just kind of looking at this thing going, will they make it or not? And I found that to be really interesting, whether it is like close-up shots of Tommy lying on the beach as he's kind of looking at kind of the devastation going on in the sea, or whether it is watching some of these soldiers on the boat as it's sinking, and you have like really disorienting camera angles where the water is like rising, but it's rising like from left to right or strange directions. Yeah,
that's right, and sideways. So they have these cameras. So they had one of the ships that they had, the Minesweeper set, was a sort of half a ship with forced perspective, so the top of it looked taller and further away than it really was, and they had it on a giant gimbal so it could sort of tip over, and there's all the to show that it's sinking. And they had several shots that are very cool where the camera, the IMAX camera, is bolted actually to the ship, and it tips as it's tipping over on the gimbal and sinking. The water level is like spinning around the frame and then whoosh, over the top of the lens. And there's moments like that are really quite incredibly visceral and dynamic.
Well, especially when they throw a soldier in there climbing sideways across the verticality of the frame is amazing.
It lends to that disorientation that you can imagine they have in a situation like that.
And that's was one of the things about the movie that I really liked. Is like a war situation like this. Often in war movies or action movies, things that seem to be more organized and straightforward, and you go from A to B and you have that fight and then you do this. Whereas in Dunkirk, it's quite chaotic and no one really seems to know exactly what's going on, and there's stuff coming at you from all directions, and you're hopping between different scenes where no one really seems to, be fully aware of what's going to happen. And that, to me, seemed to represent the reality of being in a war situation like that. You just don't know what's going on, and it is chaotic and dangerous at any second. And I think it was somehow captured quite elegantly, I think, with the movie.
Something else that struck me, which not until it was over really, is how this is largely a war film that's about a retreat from this largely faceless enemy. It's not really a film about heroics. I mean, we have that kind of that final last bit with Tom Hardy, but other than that...
Yeah, which I really loved. I loved that moment where he runs out of gas in the plane and it's just gliding in almost silence of just a wind noise. And that, for me, kind of, in a way, that just those shots of that plane gliding over the beach sort of almost epitomized that sort of meditative nature of the movie that's also there amongst the chaos. It's kind of interesting. It's sort of the way that it drags you in like that.
It's to me, it's an emotional uncorking after all of this movie, and I found myself just responding very emotionally. I was tearing up when we finally have that, that sunset.
Yeah, well, the first time I saw it, when he finally he finally went down and landed on the beach, it's really quite. My gosh,
Yeah, the rest of it, it's amazing, it's weighty, it's impactful, but that sequence, when you finally get that silence, and it made me reflect on the sequence frankly, in The Last Jedi, when Laura Dern hyperspaces through the rest of the Imperial fleet in complete silence, like that sort of nature, especially in Dunkirk, as we've been sort of, and I'll say this, with all respect, we've been suffering through this sort of shepherd tone, irresolute music or soundscape that to have that sort of release during this, it's really stunning.
Yeah, there's a nice moment. I mean, look, I think Chris Nolan's, he's a master filmmaker, and he understands and controls every element of what he's dealing with, and so to have, it's quite. I think what's amazing is he has this epic movie with the car, thousands of extras and ships and planes and explosions and all the rest of it, and he's able to also very carefully control this level of intimacy in the movie without having a central character. And I just that you're normally a narrative, you're following the hero, and things are a bit more clear cut, and it's not in this movie. So it's quite almost experimental in a way what he's doing.
It very much is. It's taking kind of a war film, which people are kind of used to, and it's taking out that storytelling, that standard Hollywood storytelling element out of it, and it is making something that's very much more kind of this emotional moment of people just trying to figure out this particular situation. And just right, the whole idea of will they or won't they for every character, I thought was quite interesting, where you didn't really feel like, oh, well, he's the hero, he's definitely going to make it, or things like that. I mean, I wouldn't have been surprised if Tommy or got shot, or if Mr. Dawson's ship got sunk. Like, all of it could have happened, and I wouldn't have been surprised.
No, that's right, because anything could happen. It has a certain unpredictability about it too.
Yeah, I mean, the way he uses time, talking about the film on 3 different time scales, right? The 1 week, the 1 day, and the 1 hour. As soon as I wrap my head around what's going on there, I feel like I'm slapped in the face. This is, as you say, he's a master filmmaker. This guy is operating at a different level.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, it took upon first seeing the movie, it took me a little while to get my head around that, as to, how come we're over there? But then you realize what's going on, and then you realize when the storylines cross over, like when Tom Hardy's plane flies over the Tommy's boat, and not Tommy, the Mr. Lawson's boat rather, and right, there's the connection. There he is. That's his moment of his hour versus their moment of their day, and and it kind of it's very clever. And then of course, as a filmmaking technique to build tension, it's important, because especially as the movie ramps up towards the ending, you want to be able to cut between these threads, so you can build up the pace and build up the tension. If you only had one thread going, it's harder to do that. And if you give yourself three storylines all happening at the same time, then you get that opportunity to chop and change between them and use match cuts, like you're cutting from the little boat, and then there's a similar shot that you're cutting to from the beach, and so that it's like the action is almost continuous, even though we're dealing with all these different places and these different time sort of zones. They're kind of all becoming one. And that was clever.
But from your perspective as a cinematographer, would this, I mean, you're trying to sort of obviously unravel this with the benefit of hindsight. Does this change, does these 3 timeline approach to the narrative, does it change the way you approach the camera in your perspective? Potentially.
I mean, it depends on whether you wanted a really different stylistic feel to one or another of the different timeline stories. I think because in Dunkirk, you've got the guy on the beach, and then the ships, and then you've got the little boat, and then you've got the plane. So that each of those scenarios has its own individual visual identity because of the nature of the way you have to shoot it. So that itself kind of gives you a sense of definition about which one you're in, because in the plane it's all aerials, and you're in the plane the whole time. You never sort of see the air base or where they took off from or any of that. They're always in the air. Tom Hardy's always flying, so it's all air-to-air stuff and rigs on the planes, on the Spitfires. And so that gives it, in itself, it's got its own look and feel for those sequences just by the nature of it. But the movie is consistent in terms of its look over the whole thing, because they shot the whole thing on either the IMAX cameras or the 65mm camera. So the look is pretty consistent.
Aside from the look, the way that all of that does kind of feel like it is of the same world, I did find it really interesting in the sound design also, how they bring this kind of ticking clock throughout. And
yeah, or it's a ticking clock, or sometimes it sounds like a heartbeat kind of thing, doesn't it? Part of it, yeah, it's like a pumping noise,
right?
Yeah.
And how they play with that, and sometimes how the sound feels like the ticking speeds up a little bit or it slows down a little bit, and kind of using it to emphasize different elements within the story, and also kind of used to kind of just get you to feel like more tense from different scenes. I mean, sometimes when that ticking clock is playing, and all of a sudden it really starts picking up as like you see the plane flying overhead, and he's chasing down one of the German planes. It's like it just really builds that tension. It was such a fascinating tool that I've seen employed before, but I don't feel like I've ever seen it used as well. Like this, it was so successful hearing that ticking clock used that way.
I think it was because this movie has that sense that it's all happening, whilst it's happening in those three different time sort of periods we're talking about, the compressed hour, day, week. It all seems like it's happening in real time in some way. Like this is all like happening in a 2-hour thing when you sit down and watch the movie. It's actually, I think it's just under 2 hours, isn't it? This movie.
It's surprisingly short for the subject matter.
Yeah. For Christopher
surprisingly
Nolan,
short considering what it is. Yeah, that's right. And it's sort of so that because you feel like you're watching a real time movie, that ticking clock idea of beating heart, rhythmic sort of pumping thing. Seems to work even better because you're always conscious of the time slipping by, and they haven't got much time because the Germans are coming. So there's this, there's a sense of urgency to get the guys off the beach. The whole thing is a ticking clock from the beginning.
It really is. It's interesting, like the way that he structured the script. I mean, I already said it's not really about heroes, but it really is kind of almost about these self-interested. I don't want to call them cowards, but Tommy certainly is acting in self-interest throughout. I mean, all of his actions in the beginning, like picking up the guy, the injured person to carry him on so he can get onto the boat before other people. It's so interesting how like that's who we're following,
which is almost like an anti-hero. Why are we following these guys? But what it tells you is that this is the reality for a lot of these soldiers as they're trying to escape. They don't want to be heroes, They just, at this point in time when there's no point attacking the Germans, and they can't, they're not going to win against those odds. They've got to just get out of there. They've just got to try and. They just want to live.
It hit well with the end of the film when you have Winston Churchill's his speech kind of being read by Tommy as they're on the train as they're talking about this. Because, I mean, it was interesting, and it didn't even hit me until I get to the end of the film where Alex is talking about, being afraid that the public's going to hate them because they all fled. They weren't staying and fighting. And the fact that it was like this, it was exactly the opposite of what he was expecting. It really kind of struck me. I'm like, it was so fascinating to kind of look at it through that lens.
Well, this film makes a strong statement that there's a difference between cowardice and fear. And we're picking up a place in the story where they have nothing but fear. They're alone, they're on a beach, they're completely isolated, and they're losing a major part of the battle. And I think, if you focus on just this one guy trying to get out of there, it may look like he's a coward. But if he were truly a coward, would he be there in the first place?
Right.
I just found myself kind of reflecting on that throughout the film.
And it's because it's not that kind of heroic sort of war film of a, almost propagandist sense. It's not like that at all. It's really telling a totally different story to what it's like being in that situation, in a war situation, being a human being. and how you would really react. It just has that resonance about it, I think.
Aside from the film, using film stock, the IMAX film stock for this, I thought it was interesting that Nolan was very adamant to use as many practical effects as possible to avoid kind of the CG and everything. And I think that also lent to people's reactions and kind of what we saw and kind of had as a visceral reaction when we were watching them.
It has a huge amount to do with it, because he does a lot of, as much as they can do, he does in camera, and that's why they had, actual Spitfires or replica Spitfire planes with the actual IMAX cameras attached to them, flying around and filming actual, dogfights. They're real. They're largely real aircraft, and that, just do it when you could create it all fully CGI and these days, and it looked pretty real, but it's not necessarily going to have a certain visceral quality that he's able to capture. So it's, of course, who knows the difference, the expense and effort gone to having to do it that way.
Oh, sure. And
is
cost.
Incredible. And the planning and the cost, and okay, we've got to all use real planes, and it's all,
Right.
and get them to fly past, and we've got to time it so the explosion's exactly the right time as the planes fly through. And, and these days often all the planes are CGI and we don't have to, do any of that. But he did it the hard way in every respect. And, I think it makes a big difference. I think it's not everyone's going to make movies that way, the way Chris Nolan makes them, but I'm kind of glad he is. He's still doing
There's
it.
a very funny article on Art of VFX written by Vincent Frey. It's an interview with Andrew Jackson, who is the overall VFX supervisor. He's over at Double Negative, and it feels like Jackson is trolling Frey, because he's asking these questions like, how did you do all of the battle? Well, those were practical. Those were in camera. Really? Okay. How about the ships sinking? Oh no, we have ships on a gimbal. We definitely sank those.
Yeah.
How about the planes crashing into the water? Surely you did CG to crash the plane. No, we pretty much crashed the planes into the water.
the real plane
It was all
crashed into the
practical.
water.
And then it's like, what did you do, man?
Yeah. Actually, I'd be interested to know exactly what they did.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I'm sure there's some visual effects in there that is quite seamless, but because it's minimized, or it's background and bit of, I know there's extensions, obviously, of all the guys on the beach. I don't think they actually had 200,000 guys, but things like that. I mean, I don't know exactly, but the fact that so much of it is captured in camera is just adds to that amazing visceral quality of.
What's your take on the whole idea that Nolan had of, here he had this story that was, he didn't want it to feel like there is a central protagonist, of going with largely unknowns to kind of carry the weight of the film on their shoulders. Yeah.
I wonder about that. Obviously with the young guy, the young soldier on the beach, Tommy, he's a young actor, so he may well have been an unknown anyway, at any rate. But the only real, there's Kenneth Branagh's in it and Tom Hardy's in it, so I guess there's a couple of familiar faces.
Right. There were a couple. I think he cast a couple like Kenneth Branagh and James Darcy as the colonel and commander that were on the mole, kind of during the evacuation, and Nolan said he kind of wanted them to be there as almost a Greek chorus for the audience,
right.
Which I thought was interesting, because they are there to kind of contextualize a lot of stuff going on for you, and I thought that was pretty interesting.
Man, they're kind of the only people that really haven't much dialogue, actually.
Yeah, really.
In terms of a conversation, and that's kind of, there's not a lot of words spoken in the movie, which is interesting, because it was also a little bit of a technical decision about why he decided to shoot IMAX so much of the movie. Is because it didn't have a lot of dialogue. The problem with an IMAX camera is it's incredibly noisy, so you can't actually record any dialogue or sound whilst the camera's running. So in those longer dialogue scenes, probably particularly the ones on the mole with Kenneth Branagh, he had to shoot 65mm Panavision cameras rather than IMAX, which is a format probably roughly half the size. but they're properly soundproof cameras that you can record sound with. So that was sort of conceptually, that sort of, by having a minimal amount of dialogue throughout the movie, that allowed him to shoot, more with the IMAX camera, which is what they, were really keen on.
Looking at the cast of people that we had, and we talked a little bit about Tommy, played by Finn Whitehead, who was largely this was largely his first film, and likewise Alex was played by Harry Styles, who I guess I could say he's largely an unknown as far as film goes, but of course he's a member of One Direction, so there certainly is a contingency of people who know who he is.
What's most interesting about that is he was cast unknown to
Nolan.
To Nolan, yeah.
Oh, right.
He didn't know he was in One Direction, yeah. Yeah, he actually won the role at an audition.
So
yeah.
Chris Nolan's not a huge One Direction fan then?
Not a huge One Direction fan.
I guess not. Looking at some of the other areas of the cast, though, I did want to chat a little bit about the cast that we have there. We have Mark Rylance as Mr. Dawson and Cillian Murphy as the soldier that they bring on. Also, Tom Glenn Carney as Peter, Mr. Dawson's son, and Barry Keoghan as George. It's such an interesting small group that we have here, and Mark Rylance, he has been nothing but an amazing actor in films ever since I first saw him in Bridge of Spies, and he's just been doing amazing stuff. I know he's done a lot of theater and a lot of other work, but his performance here as Mr. Dawson really kind of made so much of this film for me, particularly the moment when he sees his son this is after George has died accidentally due to the hands of Cillian Murphy. And Cillian is asking him if he's okay. And Peter just kind of says, yeah. And Mr. Dawson, he just kind of gives his son that little nod.
Yeah. Did you see that little nod? Yeah. Isn't that was so brilliant. That's such a lovely little bit of performance there. It's like, it's okay. You did the right thing.
It was so powerful. It's dealing with these soldiers. I mean, this is a guy who's already going through PTSD here.
And it just sort of summed up his character, and it kind of summed up emotionally the character of all the English aliens that sort of, went over there in their little boats to try and rescue as many soldiers. There's something about it that was really quite powerful and heartfelt, like that they would, of course they would do that, they had to do it.
It's a funny statement on the civilians' understanding of the cost of war, right? I mean, in this case, Mr. Dawson understands the cost of war and is willing to do something that is so heart-wrenching as to lie to this soldier because he knows what the soldier's going through and has been through it himself.
Exactly. No, very powerful. He was kind of like a little rock in the movie, his performance, actually. Even though he's technically not the main character, because it's not about him, it's about something more than that, much bigger than that.
Right, just like exactly what he says to the soldiers, like, we've got to go back, there's no hiding from it, son, we've got to do it. It's just like it's much bigger than me. It's not about me, and if I'm okay, we've got to go back.
We've got to talk just a little bit about the air, because I have never seen dogfighting like this.
No. For me, it was like one of the real highlights of the movie that I thought, wow, the dogfighting sequences are just so good. And, I think they went to extraordinary lengths to put the IMAX cameras in the planes and fit them, for all those visceral sort of perspective shots, and also shots into the cockpit where the camera could actually pan around inside the cockpit. They used a specially designed periscope lens that worked with IMAX. So this especially
is amazing.
The people from Panavision specially made it. I think it was Dan Sasky, who's the lens, kind of incredible lens guru at Panavision, built this periscope lens that could work on a giant format, and they could swivel it around and tilt it up and down inside the cockpit, because the camera itself, of course, isn't going to fit in the cockpit. Forget about it. So it had to be sort of extended in there, and then they could actually do little camera moves and stuff, like when it's on the pilot, and then it pans a little bit to look out the window to see the plane crashing below, or the boat. The boats are sort of below as he swings around. It quite extraordinary to go a bit, like, again, it's sort of like the easy way to be used digital. Even if you just use digital for those sequences in the plane, would have been, there's so many technical ways you could have done it, but no, they did it the really difficult way, trying to making it work on IMAX film cameras. And you have to give them credit for that, for making it work so well.
You've got some great shots with the camera mounted on the plane.
That's right.
as it maneuvers, and it reminded me of GoPro footage. But I'm like, it's like GoPro footage at the highest level.
It's the most amazing GoPro.
It's like a GoPro camera that just happens to be about 2,000 times bigger than an actual GoPro. I mean, literally, these cameras weigh about 80 pounds and are like, about 2.5 feet wide and 2 feet deep. It's a huge giant box.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, the work of Jack Loudon and Tom Hardy as Collins and Ferrier, and of Michael Caine as their voice on the radio.
Oh, right. Is that Michael Caine? I didn't know that in the credit. Oh, right. Great. Yeah,
I guess it was a little nod to his role that he had in the movie The Battle of Britain.
Yeah, that's right.
Which, that's great. And of course, he's a Nolan regular.
Yes, he is, of course.
Just a terrific set, and that's one that for me, that I don't know. There are some sequences where you have the boats, crushing the soldiers in the water, and that's pretty horrifying. But for me, the sequence that really triggers every one of my little anxieties is these guys going under in the planes, and that rescue was particularly strong point in the
where he's rescued out of the sinking plane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was just awful. And it was played for so long.
It's just
so long, over and over. We're going to cut away and do something else. And then, he's still banging on the glass. Yep, still there.
No. It's one of those worst fears, isn't it? Getting drowned in something and you can't get out of. And I think there's a couple of scenes where Nolan plays that, because they're all the men trapped in the sinking minesweeper as well. And only Tommy gets out through the door,
and the Dutch and the little Dutch ship.
That's right. Yeah, the trawler.
They're in at the end. You got that one guy
who can't get out,
who doesn't make it out. Yeah.
And that Dutch ship was another wonderful little visual beacon throughout each of the sequences. That we keep seeing.
Yeah, because it was half sinking out. Yeah, that's right. It kept floating out into where the other action was happening in the other story.
Right. It was like this weird little cameo.
What?
There's some sweet Dutch money in this production. That's what
maybe.
That is.
Well, there's that Dutch character as well. That they drag him down into the
exactly. Hans Zimmer does the score for this, and he's also done a lot of Nolan's films. This is one where his like Pete already mentioned, those shepherd tones that he has droning on through the score throughout here. It's a visceral score. It's not one that I think would be an easy listen outside of the film.
No, I don't think so at all. But I think it works really well for the film. I thought it was one of the sort of highlights of it, because it's used, especially at the beginning, is quite sparingly. You don't hear a lot of score at the beginning of the movie. It's just sort of ambient sound, a lot of it, especially at the beginning where he's still trying to escape from the town and get to the beach. But then it starts building, and then you start hearing the score sort of making its mark.
What's so funny about it, though, is I think the first resolved chord is an hour and 13 minutes into the film.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Right.
And it's when the first note of the the boats is coming into the bay.
Oh, yeah, where the little boats arrive. Yeah,
it's like the hero
and
music.
They start cheering, because there's only really one moment like that in the movie.
Exactly.
That kind of joy, it's a long, slow build to you before you get to that.
My understanding of that is when that music hits, it's actually Hans Zimmer actually pulled this piece that Edward Elgar had written called Nimrod from his Enigma variations, and he pulled that, and then he likes playing with stuff. He slowed that music down to 6 beats per minute and added some bass notes. So it's such a strangely slow yet very positive moment. Is very interesting.
Oh, right.
Really powerful. Lee Smith did the editing on this. He's a Christopher Nolan regular. My understanding is that it was the aerial sequence that was the one that they really struggled with the most, trying to get the beats right for that and feel out the timing of how it should play out and when it should be cut in. And I mean, again, this is a story of these 3 journeys that we're on, finding the right way to kind of cut between them. I can only imagine the challenge that Smith had as all the footage was coming in.
Yeah, well, I think it would have taken them a long time, the editing process, because there isn't a hard and fast way to make, interweave all those stories necessarily. I mean, I wonder what the original script had, what shape that was, and whether that was any resemblance to the finished movie, because things often change. Another thing I wonder too, and I don't know the answer, is whether they went in and did many reshoots, like additional shooting after that already tried to cut it together, or whether he just already had all the material he needed. That'd be interesting, because with the movies I've been doing, like Get Out and Happy Death Day, and pretty much all the Blumhouse movies, at least, we've always gone back for, this is on a smaller scale, mind you, but we've always gone back for a few days to shoot additional material, whether it be different material, like reshot scenes that are going to, take a slightly different form, or whether it's just extra scenes or extra shots, to flesh out the movie. And that's quite a normal thing. And I'm wondering if with Dunkirk, whether that was, I don't know the answer, but it'd be interesting whether they had to do that, because a lot of the scenes would be difficult to recreate months later and go, oh, now we need to shoot some more stuff of that ship, and it's sort of like,
especially considering the location nature of this, because they did film this out at Dunkirk Beach, and they were filming this in a lot of the real locations, and I can only imagine the complexities of going, okay, well, now we have to go back, and they had to rebuild the entire mole, because that I don't know if it had fallen into disuse and disrepair or been destroyed.
Oh, the real mole.
It wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they had to rebuild the entire thing using the blueprints from the original. So, yeah, I can only imagine the complexities of having to go back and do some reshoots.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, because so many movies do a reshoot, but this one, and it would be tricky.
We've got a phone tree with about 1,000 phone numbers on it. We need you to call all the extras.
Yeah. That's right. They got to be the same people. Come on, we've got to cut the same
people, because all those vintage uniforms have been cut and fit to size.
We've got to get them all back. I mean, often, a lot of that stuff does go into storage in case there's, reshoots need to be made.
Christopher Nolan certainly is somebody who I think has proven himself as a filmmaker with films like this. It was funny, though, I read something about how I think he came up with the idea for this like back in the 90s, and he'd kind of been playing with it over the couple decades before he finally got it made. But he said recently or when he got it made, he's like, well, I wanted to wait until I'd had a chance to really prove myself shooting big action sequences in films. And I'm like, well, you kind of proved that quite a while ago.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But this has been something that he'd been wanting to do for a while, right? I see. Yeah. Well, it's a big story. It hasn't been told recently in film, this, the story of Dunkirk, and kind of a unique sort of slice of, war history, because it's really about a rescue, not about, a victory or an attack or anything. So it's, it's an interesting part to tackle.
It strikes me as a war film that just because of the way that it was made, where it isn't kind of artificially implanting this protagonist in this story so we could kind of see this heroic journey, it strikes me as a film that might last longer through time, because it feels a little more timeless. It just feels like a slice of life of this war as you're kind of watching it. And it felt very much to me like something that definitely is going to stand the test of time.
I think so, because it's not going to date itself either by having, a particular story focused around a particular person or a particular actor.
I can't wait. It's not yet a film that I am, ready to show to my young kids. I feel like they need to grow up a little bit, but this is one that I'm really looking forward to. And it fared well. Andy, you want to walk us through how it did at awards season?
Well, it still is in awards season.
Yeah, still in awards season. That's right. There's a lot we don't know.
It's so far. It's had 26 wins and 124 other nominations in awards. As far as what it's received thus far, I know the Golden Globes are happening tomorrow. It did get 3 nominations there for Best Motion Picture Drama. No competition for Get Out there. Best Director and Best Score. Not to mention the SAG Awards nominated it for Outstanding Action Performance by a Stunt Ensemble. So It's I think that it's one of those films that it may not be kind of a huge explosion as far as like the movie that's winning all the awards, but it certainly is something that I think is going to get a lot of recognition as we start watching over the coming months.
Well, it's going to be interesting about the award for best cinematography too, because it's the main contender, I think, for best cinematography this year is going to be Roger Deakins with 2049, Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
I think
definitely.
is totally incredible standout of photography. But Kirk is, with that visceral quality that's achieved with this huge format, it's also really quite amazing. And I think, that could be, giving Blade Runner a run for its money, so to speak, I think, potentially.
Could be, yeah, definitely.
How about the money, Andy?
Well, Christopher Nolan had a budget of $100 million plus another $50 million for prints and advertising, so $150 million for his war film. The movie premiered July 13th in London before having its wide release July 21st, 2017, opposite Girls Trip and Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. With all the various formats to view it, including ticket upgrade costs, the movie went on to make $188.4 million domestically and $337.2 million internationally, for a total gross of $525.6 million, making Dunkirk the highest-grossing World War II film ever made, not adjusted for inflation. All of this together puts Nolan's war film at an adjusted profit per finished minute of $3.5 million.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah, I know. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And it was interesting, the just briefly, the different ways you could go and see it. I mean, I know I didn't see it at IMAX film presentation. Apparently that was the ultimate, but I saw it at the digital IMAX presentation. So it was, which was a bigger screen, and also the sort of almost square, almost 4:3 format, not quite. So you see a lot of, more above and below the frame, like the full IMAX picture, which is almost square.
It certainly made it more complicated to look at how to go see this movie, because I remember when it came out, it had there was this thing about, okay, these are the ways you can see this movie. I'm like, wow, this is really going to confuse a good chunk of the movie-going audience.
Because a lot of people wouldn't know their IMAX from their, whatever, digital this, IMAX that, 70 millimeter presentations that were widescreen. I've been looking at the 4K digital streaming release that's recently come out, and that's cropped. That sort of looks almost like a scope picture. Not quite, almost. It's sort of somewhere between 2:1 and 2.4:1. So it's widescrreen, so it doesn't show you it's not square like the IMAX format. So it's it's cropping the top and bottom of that frame. So there's, I think that's the thing when you shoot a format like IMAX, because it's doesn't conform to the standard theatrical sizes or even television sizes. You have to make compromises when for all those different platforms.
At least it's not pan and scan, man. This could have been pan and scan.
That's true. Yeah. So but it's interesting. I mean, that's just kind of fun to, that they're playing with those formats, and they'll pursue it and persevere with it and make it work. It's great.
Well, I'm curious, how many people are going to kind of use this as an example to say, hey, let's go out and do that. I feel like there are very few filmmakers anymore who want to kind of push themselves to that. And Nolan certainly seems to be one who continuously does. But it makes me wonder where we're going to get more of this.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like for Nolan, it's a religion that he shoots it on film, and the sort of highest quality film he can use, in this case IMAX. But for a lot of most, like 99.99%, just about, of most directors and filmmakers, that's not a huge priority. The format that you're shooting on. You'll shoot it on a professional digital format, whatever's fits the budget or the tone of the mood of the movie. And if it's digital, fine. And if it's film, then that might be a good choice. But he's one of the few that actually follow a film path, to the exclusion of everything else. That's interesting too.
I think, gents, it's time. We're running close to our wrap time, and so I think it's time for us to do the hard work of this conversation, and that is to head over to flickchart.com and rank it. Now, we walked you through this a little bit, Toby. It's a simple head-to-head ranking. We've ranked all of the films that we've ever talked about on this show, some 400 some odd, and this Dunkirk will just get randomly paired with movies throughout our ranking, and we'll just pick one as we go up the list and see where it lands in our overall stack ranking of films. And Andy goes ahead and gives us a start here to kick us off.
Indeed. Here we go. First off, we have Dunkirk or Star Trek Beyond.
Well, that'd be Dunkirk for me.
Dunkirk for me.
And I will say Dunkirk as well. All right, next up, we have Dunkirk or a little Kurosawa. We're looking at Seven Samurai.
That becomes a bit of a challenge, but I'm going to stick
a little more
with,
tricky.
Stick with Dunkirk.
Still Dunkirk for me.
I'm going to say Seven Samurai, but Dunkirk will take it. Next up, we have Dunkirk or Aliens.
Ooh. Oh, wow.
Yeah. I know. It gets tough. It gets tough.
We actually call these a flick chart hate crime because it does not discriminate between, genre or...
Wow. No, it doesn't. It's like you could be comparing apples to oranges. Boy. I'm gonna break. I'm gonna pick Aliens.
I am too.
I didn't see that coming, but I am also gonna pick Aliens on this one.
All right. Next up, Dunkirk or some fun movie. We've got The World's End.
Oh, yeah.
No. Right. Oh, my heart is with The World's End.
It's a pretty good movie, but I'm going to pick Dunkirk for that.
Boy.
I know you want to pick Dunkirk, Andy. You don't have to feel bad.
I am picking Dunkirk, actually.
Okay. All right.
So you can pick The World's End and not feel bad.
I did what I needed to do, Edgar. I did my part.
All right. We've got Dunkirk or The French Connection with William Friedkin.
I'm going with Dunkirk on this.
I'm going with French Connection. So it's all on you, Toby.
I'm sticking with Dunkirk.
Right. Next up, we have Dunkirk or Apocalypse Now.
Oh, come on.
Now, come on, man. If there were ever a more appropriate pairing, I don't know what it is. Come on.
Both the movies are a bit of a trip. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm with Apocalypse Now. That is an all-time classic.
Yep, I'll go with Apocalypse Now as well.
It's an extraordinary movie.
Okay. Well, it's a vote of principle. I'm Dunkirk on this one, but I'm okay.
And you're okay with that. All right. Next up, we have Dunkirk or Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. Dunkirk on this one.
Yeah, I'm going.
We'll also go with Dunkirk.
Dunkirk. Dunkirk
or Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Next up, we have Dunkirk or The Matrix.
Oh, wow.
Ooh.
Gee.
I'm going to go with The Matrix.
Yeah, I'm with The Matrix.
Matrix here.
Wow.
Well, that is it, gents. Dunkirk landed at slot 48 out of 333. So that is a pretty strong standing for this.
Wow,
film.
That's interesting because the films that you're comparing it with are only ones that you've already talked about on the show.
That we've watched,
right.
And so, to that point, the films that we've talked about, with the exception of, I think, Under the Cherry Moon and Rush, we love all of these movies.
Yeah.
Okay, I love Under the Cherry Moon. Shut up, Andy.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, these are all movies that are great. So I feel like that is seriously and for me, we also do a thing with partnerletterbox.com. It's just a star rating, and for me, this is a hard 5 stars. I really enjoy this film.
Can you have partial stars? I rated this as a 4.5.
What is it that shaves off a half a star for you, Toby? Where do you shave off half a star on Dunkirk?
Well, I only give away 5 stars on my own sort of mental rating of movies very rarely. So it has to be an absolute masterpiece. And this movie is almost there, but, maybe because you're not tied as emotionally into a central character, maybe that is something that just takes that little shaving of half a star off. Maybe that's, even though it works so well in many other ways. So I'm not sure.
I don't know. I think it might have been a 4.5 had I not actually started crying during that last sequence. It surprised me so much that this is such a strong.
Oh, that's
film.
great.
So, and Andy, is that you too?
I'm at 4.5 on this one. Also, it's I found it incredibly interesting. I do feel like this is one of those movies that certainly could go up. on subsequent viewings. It was a really powerful experience for me, just watching this film that largely I didn't have anyone to directly connect with. But then by the time I got to the end, I found myself still like emotionally invested with the group. And I found that such an interesting way to structure it.
Me too. I agree.
Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us about us. Do you live online at all? If people want to find you or learn more about you, do you have Twitter or Facebook or anything?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, and you can find me at www.tobyoliver.com is my site where my work is, and so people can log in there. But I'm on not so much Twitter, but I'm on Instagram and Facebook.
Instagram, is that Instagram at Toby Oliver?
Yeah, Toby Oliver DP.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us in the Next Reel Speakeasy.
It's been fantastic and great talking about the movie with you guys. It's been real fun.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And for everybody else out there, we hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those sites. And of course, head on over to patreon.com/thenextreel if you feel like helping us out a little bit. And don't forget to head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and comment. It really does help more people find us. Thanks for tuning in to The Next Reel, everybody. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
I'm gonna use you to be my friend.
I love having these wonderful chats on movies we like with all these industry guests talking about some of their favorite movies.
So many great conversations on that show about so many great movies.
We have so much fun having these conversations, but producing the show week after week does require a lot of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these incredible conversations.
The Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals links to the source material for all the adapted film discussions on the Next Reel's family of podcasts. Purchasing through our links supports the show.
It's your one-stop shop for Amazon and Apple links where you can buy your copy of the original source material.
Original material for movies we like, movies like Casino Royale,
The Silent Partner,
Never Let Me Go,
Silver Linings Playbook,
There Will Be Blood, based on Upton Sinclair's Oil.
I believe it's Oil!
Oh yeah, I forgot the exclamation point.
Plus, by using those links to buy your next read, Apple and Amazon show us a little bit of love, which allows you to support our family of shows with minimal effort.
thenextreel.com/originals. It's a great way to support the show and find your next page turner.
That's right. Head over to thenextreel.com/originals to pick out your next read and dig in today.